So, welcome to the third episode of FS Podcast. Today, we will be talking about AfricaMattis with Farai. Farai, welcome. Welcome to Frankfurt.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, guys. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm very excited to speak with you too.
Yes, and also on this episode, we have also another host.
I'm
Her name is
Rachel.
Rachel.
Yeah, it's my first time doing an interview, like filmed interview. I'm usually the paper kind, but yeah.
It's great.
No, but it's good to have you. It's a really diverse group of cast members here. But before we go into AfricaMattis, I'd just like to share about Frankfurt Podcast, FS Frankfurt School Podcast, FS Podcast. So what we do, for those who don't know, those new listeners, we speak on diverse topics, and we bring experts to speak on those topics. And Farai, we'll consider you an expert in this case. And what we like to do is just try to speak about the opportunities in those fields, but also the challenges and things that need to be overcome. So students are inspired, or professionals, young professionals are inspired to enter those fields willingly, knowing the risks that are involved. And with that said...
That's great. Wow. Lots of expectations here.
No, but...
No.
We really are interested in what you're doing. Before we get into AfricaMattis, tell us more about yourself.
Okay, great. So I'm Farai Mubaiwa. My father's from Zimbabwe. My mom is South African, hence the very Zimbabwean name. And everyone's like, "What? How can she be South African?" But yeah, that's where the mixed masala comes from. I just moved to London just over 2 months ago. I'm doing my master's in the political economy of emerging markets. And the reason I chose this master's is because I have a background in financial accounting. So I did my undergraduate degree in financial accounting and then my honors degree, which is a first-year postgrad in South Africa, in management accounting. And I decided that I've got this cool accounting background, but I really love development and especially the interplay between business and politics. And after working at Deloitte for a few months, I said, actually, I can do so much more with this. Let me go and see where this interest takes me. And then I applied for my master's, and I've been enjoying it since.
So have you always, before you went to Deloitte and you studied accounting, was that always an interest? Did you always say, okay, I want to be an accountant?
So I think, to be so honest, I chose accounting because I was really great at it in high school.
Okay.
So in high school, I was getting A's for accounting, and it was my best subject. And then my parents were like, yeah, you've got options, like typical African parents. You can be an accountant, a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. And I was like, I'm going to go for accountant. So I chose that. And
Same, yeah. I know that's a typical environment.
Exactly. And then I did really well in my undergraduate, but once it was time to do my accounting honors, my honors year in South Africa, I decided against financial accounting. I thought it was too narrow, and I thought that with my own interests, I like complexities,
Yes.
and I like the complexities that management accounting allows one to explore. So
Yes.
I decided to go on with that.
So from there, what inspired you to want to master in, you said it's in political economies?
Yes.
Political economies of emerging markets.
Yeah. So what inspired me is that, because I said to myself, I already have my background in accounting. And because of my activism on campus as a student, but also as a student leader at Stellenbosch University, I knew so much about politics. And people like to separate business and politics, especially in South Africa. People love to see your private sector separately from what your public sector does. But they're so interrelated. I mean, half the decisions the government makes definitely will affect what businesses do. What businesses do affect what the government does. So I thought if I can explore this a bit more, it will make my time as a consultant at Deloitte a lot more fruitful. And I was working with quite a few parastatals. So it was awesome that to see the interplay between business and government. And then that's what led me to choose this. And what's great is that because it's on emerging economies, you learn a lot about Latin America, Southeast Asia, Africa, and the similarities and differences between all these different continents.
That is interesting, because right here we have, well, you're from Africa, I mean, and I, obviously, but and I'm from the Bahamas, we were Caribbean, Latin America region. And yeah, you're from Europe, so we can all talk about some of the
Yeah.
cultural aspects that define our lives
Yes.
in
And
many
I,
ways.
I did live in Southeast Asia for some time, so I have a bit of a background on it. But
Okay.
yeah, I was in Singapore, so have the more rich background because Singapore is still one of the richest country in the world. But I had the opportunity to visit around and see like how different the culture there was and how amazing and how diverse it was from Vietnam to the Laos and even Myanmar. So
Okay.
yeah, that was really interesting.
Sure. That's amazing to learn that.
Yeah, I had it was really like a great opportunity to go there, and I think I would not have been the same person if I didn't. So.
No, that's fantastic. I think that's what you learn about traveling and being exposed to other places. It's, I think your opinion as a person becomes a lot more refined because you've had
It
different
is.
influences and experiences.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you were saying even in Frankfurt, before we had a conversation before the podcast, and you mentioned that in Frankfurt you got a different exposure, the different taste of.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to share.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been to, this is my third German city. And so I've been to Stuttgart, and then I visited two of my friends who live on the border of like the Netherlands. I can't remember what it's called, but it starts with an E. That small town there. And then now I'm in Frankfurt. I find Frankfurt very businesslike, very disciplined.
It is. It is.
I think that's a nice way to put it. You see when people stop when the red man is there, and
Red
even if
light.
there's no cars at all,
Like,
people stop. And
no,
I
we
think
wait.
that's very cool. Whereas in London, it's so different. People take those red men as suggestions.
Yes.
Rather than
In
rules.
France, it's the same. In Paris, we're like, oh, red man, but there's no car. Let's just go.
Yeah, exactly. And I think another thing with Frankfurt, it's very interesting to see that. So coming from South Africa, which is very diverse, we were known as the Rainbow Nation. I don't know anymore, but yeah, which is very diverse. Then into London, which is very cosmopolitan.
Yes.
Although still not as diverse as South Africa, I think it's very cosmopolitan. Then to come here, where there's a big lack of diversity, that's very obvious. And yeah, I'm hoping that as globalization happens a lot more, then communities will start to be integrated. Because I think that makes for richer human beings when you interact with people who are so different from you.
I totally agree with you. And it's like to bring that in even in perspective for us as a student initiative. We have so many different cultures here. Like we have about 20 members, but about 16 different nationalities.
Wow.
So when you get to a topic, there's so many different points of view that are brought to the scene. Like, no, we shouldn't think this way. We should do it this way. It's very interesting when we have our meetings at FS Podcasts. But I'd like to come back to the topic of culture. But before we go into culture, I'd like to speak about AfricaMattis.
Okay.
Well, what does it represent? What does it stand for?
So I'm always really excited to talk about AfricaMattis. So essentially, we started in April 2015. And we started for two main reasons. The first reason was because in January of 2015, there were the Charlie Hebdo attacks in France. And it was so interesting because international media, it was all about the attacks. And I think that's important, that as an international community, we support one another when human rights atrocities take place. What was sad is that a day later, there were attacks in Baga, Nigeria,
Wow.
where 2,000 people were massacred. And also as a result of terrorist attacks. And what's so sad is that the international media was silent. There was no, like there was hashtag Je suis Charlie, there was no hashtag I am Baga. No one wore an I am Baga t-shirt at the Oscars. And I started to ask myself, like, do African lives have value? Because you see people are being very silent when atrocities happen to Africans. And when people do take African atrocities seriously, it needs images of black bodies in pain, for it to resonate with people.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really upset me. And another thing with that is that you had African leaders go to France, and when they found out the news about Nigeria, there wasn't this concern with them. And I think that's a huge issue in the sense that our leaders don't think we matter. We don't think we matter to each other. I mean, there were so few Africans who knew of what happened in Nigeria. And I thought that was really unfortunate. The second reason why we started AfricaMattis was because I've interacted with so many young Africans who are so intelligent and have so much to offer the continent.
Yes.
And yet in discourse with them, they can't wait to move somewhere else.
Uh-huh.
And I think it's very different if you want to study abroad to further your studies, than to completely move abroad. And the ones I spoke to said they can't wait to leave the continent. The continent is in shambles. They just think that they'd be so much better off elsewhere. And I understand that, because I think at times when you see the decisions our leaders make, it's pretty bad. When you hear of human rights violations taking place, it's very upsetting. But my argument towards them is that, all right, if you leave and you're this educated spark, what's going to happen with the continent? Surely the same systems of injustice are perpetuated.
Like the brain drain, almost.
Exactly. And surely if we want to change the narrative, then we must be part of leading that. So for those two reasons, I linked up with quite a few people, and I met the most incredible group of young people. We were all at the same university. Now AfricaMattis has grown. We're from different parts of the continent, be it Kenya, Nigeria, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia. And it's just fantastic to see that the team is so diverse. And my co-founder is Rianne Olivier. And Rianne is actually Haitian American. And she brings a very different perspective in terms of African diaspora voices there. Because that's something I definitely overlooked until I met her.
Yes.
And then thought, shoot, it must be so complex being a diaspora. Because you want to call Africa home, but where do you find yourself in everything?
It's complicated, yeah.
And then AfricaMattis started. We thought we'd just be a movement to raise awareness about like hashtag AfricaMattis, does Africa matter to us? And we grew, and our online presence grew so much. So in the past 2 years, we've reached over 15,000 young Africans.
Yes.
And we have launched workshops. We do workshops on African feminisms, on African leadership. We do school talks about youth empowerment, because Africa's got the youngest population in the world, and I think that's magic. But it's about teaching young Africans the magic in that. And then we also do a lot of, we do summits every year called Towards a Better Africa, where we get different stakeholders to come and engage on a very controversial topic and see where we can go to from then.
Whoa.
Sorry, it's a lot.
No, that's my
No,
only
it's
reaction. Whoa, like
It's so interesting and such an impressive parkour and how much you've done. It's it's like when we are there as students and we are not that different. Not that far apart in age, and I'm just sitting in my chair, and you've done so much to try to empower Black people and African people. It's very impressive.
Thank you so much.
it is impressive, but you said so much in there that's bottled up. I wanted to sack some of that, right? So
That's true.
let's get to the first reason. No, before I'd like to acknowledge, you said you started off in your one university, and then it spread,
Yeah.
and now many universities have this initiative as Africa Matters.
Yes. Yeah.
That's very cool. I found that amazing. But before we go into that, I want to get into the point that you made about wanting the news, the media, and how it affects not only the world and how the appreciation for how Africa matters, but it also affects the way Africans see issues and their awareness of certain things that happen in other countries in Africa.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, before I say that, I'd like to say, part of what I study as a Master of International Business is the African markets. And whenever I tell people that, they're like, yeah, you see opportunities there? And I'm like, yes, there are many opportunities there. But they're like, oh, but it's so corrupt, it's so government. I'm like, yes, but that's only from what you've seen in the media. Yes, there are some barriers at business that are clear. But I think the media and the way they portray Africa, it taints somewhat of the beauty. And before I keep saying Africa, another thing I learned and through my own studies here is that Africa is so diverse. You have sub-Saharan Africa, then you split sub-Saharan Africa into East Africa, South Africa. Oh man, it's just interesting. So let me put this in a question for you. How do you think ways that the media, what ways can we change the way to create awareness of the beauty and opportunities that Africa presents?
Sure. And I think that's a very important question you're asking. And it's been really interesting as Africa Matters. We realize that because of how algorithms work on Facebook, And I'm not really the best at technology, but I've been explained this by my teammates. That's why you'll only see certain news from certain channels. So you'll only see news that your friends are interested in. And because there's hardly any single dominant African news source, it's very difficult to get that information. So either if you're following CNN, hopefully not Fox News, but like CNN, Sky News, the BBC, Al Jazeera, and I think what I really love about Al Jazeera is that I think it's the one news channel that's very dedicated to covering what's happening on the continent. So what we decided to do as AfricaMattis is that our media team looks for news articles on Africa from different platforms.
Yes.
And then we put it all onto one page. That way people can follow one page where they get all the information about Africa, good or bad, because we think we should reflect both the positives and the negatives happening on the continent.
Yes.
What we also do with that is that we've encouraged young people to write, because the narrative that other people know of Africa as corrupt and poor is not my narrative of Africa. My narrative of Africa is a place that's got so much potential and youth who want to build up the continent. And so we get young people to write their own stories about the continent. And we don't ever filter out what people write. We put it onto all our platforms, share it with anyone that's interested in Africa Matters, so that plays that role. Because I think the way the media portrays Africa has a huge role in, like you said, not only how the West or the rest of the world sees Africa, but how we as Africans see each other.
Yes.
And we thought if we create a single stream of news, that helps a lot. But also if we empower young Africans to write about your own realities and then share it with us, that really, really makes a huge difference. And we think that's just been so significant. We'd hope that that in years to come they'd be really what's the word to use? They'd be a really big African media platform. There are some at the moment, but they just can't compete with the other really big international media. But what's been really great is that I went to the BBC in June, and the first people I looked for was BBC Africa. And I went straight to the editor, and I said to her, listen, I appreciate the work you guys do, but it needs to be on a larger scale. I said to them, I feel like Africa is very much on a back foot. And the response I got from the news team was amazing. They said to me, no, we agree, but help us make this happen more.
Yes.
So it's about making those partnerships as well to share news on what's happening in the continent.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it. It's definitely, I don't think it's all purpose-driven. I think in some ways the know-how. It's the know-how of actually to accomplish this increase of awareness that's needed.
Yeah.
Because once that, I think you guys, what you're doing is you have the right focus, I think, and passion, and it's just, the potential is tremendous.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I'd have sorry, I don't mean to hog the mic.
No.
But the second question to the answer that you gave of why you started AfricaMattis was related to brain drain. I see this so much in my country because, well, and some may say I'm at risk of, because I'm from the Bahamas, I'm in Germany. So I may be committing I plan to go back eventually. But I see why people leave because the opportunities in education is so vast. I see that side. And some may not see it in their own home. So I see what leads people to do it. But what ways can we get people to come back, to see the bright future, like to see the potentials to create in their own homes?
So a good friend of mine, I think it was 4 or 5 years ago, he said something so important to me. He said to me, Farai, the grass isn't greener on the other side, it's greener where you water it. And that's been something that has stood with me for as long as I can remember. And when he said that, it put so many things into perspective. Because it's easier to run to where opportunities are than to create opportunities. And I think that when we run towards where opportunities are, it's fine because we build ourselves, right? We build our expertise. But once you then continue to build the economy of like an already developed country, then what value are you really adding to the world? And I think that you're then perpetuating a system of inequality. So what I've said to so many of my friends and what so many of us do is that we go abroad, on cool scholarships that we don't have to do anything with paying for, which is fantastic. Everything's paid for. And we study and we learn and we engage with people and we network and make meaningful connections. And then we go back home with a new perspective of what is there in the market that I can create, or how can I fix something in my society. And what's been really interesting is that there was a study out 2 weeks ago about what they're referring to now as a brain gain in Africa.
Yes.
That all these young people do leave to go do their studies or work abroad for like 2-3 years, then come back with new expertise and new ways to educate others on the continent. And I think there's so much power in us making the grass greener in our own continent, because if you look at the stats, Africa has got over 226 million young people between the ages of 15 to 24. And it's then cool, we've got a big young population. And that can either go two ways. It can either be an economic burden to the country, to the continent rather, or it can be great opportunity for growth. And I think the more young people that you have who, yes, to go abroad, look at what's there, look at different ways that things work, then come back home and try to implement those, I think that's where real change happens. And I think the youth are the ones who are going to change things around.
Oh, definitely. I think what you're referring to also is the demographic dividend that they always say. It's what Africa is about to. It's about to push the economic development of Africa.
Yeah.
And what that is when you have a low dependency ratio, less older people to support, and less younger people, you have a huge working class. So what you have is a highly productive economy. So your economy is, the GDP growth will be tremendous from that decrease in dependency, increase in productivity. Yeah,
it's amazing. Africa's
I
where
don't
it's
know,
happening.
I'm talking class.
No, it's great. It's great.
Yeah.
You know, flex your education. It's so good.
No. Yeah, I just wanted to, just so our viewers know the opportunities for Africa. So, yeah, it's amazing.
Okay, just quick question.
So
you said that you want to change the way Africa is portrayed, and I want to ask, how can we as individuals that maybe don't come from Africa, and what can we do ourselves to help change this portrayal, this like bad portrayal of Africa? Yeah.
So I think it's two things. I'd say it's about how you. It's about surrounding yourself with news about Africa, which is super important because then you have a more rounded perspective. Because so often what we learn in schools is just pretty misleading. Yeah. I mean, if I look at even just coming from South Africa, what I learned about Africa was apartheid. And apartheid is something that happened in South Africa. Like, what does that have to do with the rest of the continent? Yeah. Yet my friends from Sierra Leone or Nigeria can tell me all of South Africa's history and the rest of the SADC region. But I can't tell them anything about their regions because in school it didn't teach me. So I decided that, cool, I'm going to take it upon myself to learn about the rest of the continent. And also to learn about things like the Caribbean. I thought it would have been so interesting this year. I've been really putting my focus into learning about the Caribbean and just trying to understand what's the history there, what complexities are being faced. And I think it'll be the same thing for non-Africans. Learning about the continent, its history, what it has to offer, the differences between East Africa, West Africa, the Central Africa, and so on. And then the second thing, I think it's about having discussions with people and changing their perspectives. So that's something I love to do, which is why I just love African dress as a whole. So every day, even if it's a casual day, I'll either wear my duk or I'll wear my traditional neck piece or a traditional top. One item at least, because I think that's a tool of empowerment for me. But also it's a tool to educate others about, hey, so this is actually what the continent has to offer. I think having dialogue with people changes everything, and there's so much power in conversations. And just a small joke this morning, I was super early, beat all the Germans even, and I was in reception. We had to meet at 11:30. I was here at like 10:30, practice my speech in a room and all of that. And when we met at reception, I was the first one there. And then the Germans came, and they were like, the rest of the speakers, they were like, "What, Farai, you got here so early?" And I was like, "Yeah, guys, African time is a myth." So it's like things like that where you teach people things. And I said to them, "Yeah, you were about to stereotype me, but I got here really early. And I had breakfast before them. I was just super productive." But it's things like that. And I told myself that last night. I said, "Farai, you can't be late. But then you're perpetuating stereotypes. So it's yeah, it's that dialogue, and it doesn't have to be serious all the time. It's making jokes. I've loved having conversations with people here. Things like, Germans are very disciplined when it comes to stoplights. In not only in London but in South Africa, it's a suggestion. If you can dodge the cars, and calculate, then you're commended. And I think it's interesting talking about just having those conversations with people about the continent changes everything.
Okay.
I know that. We had an exchange student from South Africa. And she's originally from Canada. She came here from South Africa. She studied in South Africa for the past 5 years. At every stoplight, she'd be like, "Oh my, you guys, let's go! No
Just
cars
go."
are running. Are you being
There's no
controlled?
cars.
Like, who's controlling your heads?" So it's very, very interesting. What I'd like to it's very the mindset. What I'd like to talk about also. You mentioned apartheid. I know you come from a generation that's like, so within the last, have you faced any of these stereotypes, or have you faced any of the effects of it?
So it's really interesting you asked me that. So the misperception that the rest of the world has is that because apartheid ended, and there's no more racism. And it's interesting because apartheid ended in legislation, but not in cultural norms.
Yes.
And that's something that, having grown up in what they then called South Africa, the Rainbow Nation, especially because I was born in 1994, it was the year of the born freeze. Like, you're born out of apartheid regime, whoopee. And for a long time in my life, I believed that. And my parents, I think they did their best to provide for my sister and I, and to tell us, Farai, everyone's an equal. No one should treat you differently. You mustn't treat anyone differently. You treat everyone with love.
Yeah.
And that's what I grew up with all the time. So I had friends of different races, and for a long time I was like, yeah, we're all the same, we're all equal, that's fine. And then I went to university. And the university I went to, they hated when I say this, but it's where apartheid was conceptualized. So lots of the apartheid leaders went to the same university I went to. And then people are like, yeah, but Farai, why'd you go to that university? And it's because my mum being a single parent, they offered me the biggest bursary. But also, as much as I do not want to go there, that's actually when my friend said to me, the grass isn't green on the other side, it's greener where you water it. Because I looked at this place, I looked at the inequality, and I was like, I'm not going to go there. I literally said to him, I'm coming to university to study, not to be a freedom fighter.
Yes.
And he was like, no, the grass is you must go do what you can there. And so I went to uni, and I had a white roommate, and I was so excited and chilled because we were just, having fun and laughing. And I remember that first day we went into the dining hall, and everyone said to her in Afrikaans, thinking I couldn't understand, but my Afrikaans is pretty damn good. Everyone was said to her, how does it feel to have a black roommate? Be careful that she doesn't steal your stuff. Are you safe there? Are you sure? Do you want to swap rooms? And this was the dialogue the whole time. And in the residence I was at, there was one other black girl who today is my best friend. We went through the most there, and it was so sad because I was living in this bubble of equality, and then I got to a university that told me that because you're black, we'll treat you differently. Because you're black, you must work 5 times as hard to get half the recognition.
Wow.
And it was a very difficult space to be in. And I had racist encounters very often. I had sexist encounters very often. But what that space taught me is that, and it's something I told to one of the other speakers last night, that going to that university both broke me and built me up. Because it taught me that as a black woman, I need to know how I navigate my way in the world. And that to other people who say, yeah, I don't see color, I'm like, actually you do. Everyone sees color. We just like to act like we don't because it's easier. But we all see color. But it really taught me that I need to know how I navigate the world. And I need to be strategic about how I present myself. But it also taught me that the worst was over. And I think that's why, as much as Frankfurt is pretty awkward, it's not that awkward. So I always just do comparisons. I'm like, yeah, I'm fine here, I'm fine. And I think, and it's tough, but that space forced me to become an activist, and it forced me to be outspoken, because before I was very passive about things. And I don't think I'd be like this if it wasn't for that experience, which is not always the greatest thing, but at least I've come out of that experience. My friends would say, blazing,
Blazing.
Yeah,
That's
come on,
nice.
blazing, because of the fact that, because of how hectic the experience was, I now know what I want in life. I know how to talk to different people. That's
Yeah.
why even when I started to work at Deloitte, I said, cool, this is who I am. I run an organization. There may be times when I'm going to start work at 10 because I'll be speaking at schools, but I'll get my work done because I know that I'm an asset.
Yes.
And I know that it means more to them that I'm there than it means to me. So it's about, yeah, it was tough. But I think that the more conversations we have in the world and the more we have things like hashtag Black Girl Magic, the
Yes.
more of a difference it makes in the world.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting. I love the approach that you took because I see that even here in Germany.
Mm.
I think, like when I first came to Frankfurt School, I was seen as the first Bahamian here in Frankfurt School.
Mm.
And a lot of people don't,
Sure.
they don't have exposure to who you are, like
Yeah.
where you come from, what you do, your life. So people are in some ways, they just don't know. They're ignorant to like the people. So I think every time, I always say this, like anytime I go somewhere, I try to meet and it's new, try to introduce myself, share about my culture, share the Bahamas, because that's exposure. That's
Yeah,
something that they can
absolutely.
learn from. Oh, I don't want to be cocky, but even when you go to Brazil, like for Brazil or for France, like if you go to Southeast Asia, people meet you and they say, okay, these are people too who have
Yeah.
similar values as me. So it breaks down barriers just by being there.
Absolutely. That's why this evening I'm starting off talking about uncomfortable things.
Oh yes.
Because once we do that, it's great. We get out of the way, then we can move on.
Oh yes. We didn't mention this earlier, but I think maybe Rachel can introduce that on TEDx FS.
Oh yes, so our speaker here is also doing TED Talk at our university, which was organized by students from our university, and we are very excited to have her. And I think it's going to be really interesting to have such a new perspective and different perspective of what we usually hear in this
Yeah.
like type of work. So, yeah.
Thank you. I'm very excited. I start off my speech quite bang and then go into issues that are very relatable. And I think it's important. I think different
Okay.
perspectives are always important. So,
And,
yeah, we'll
and
see.
for our viewers, you'll be speaking. It'll be tough. The viewers won't be able to watch it. It'll be December 2nd. Today is when it happens.
Oh, yeah.
But for our viewers, you'll be able to watch it on YouTube at Frankfurt School TEDx FS. I think
Okay.
it'll be also broadcasted there.
Okay, lovely. I'm excited. I speak on youth empowerment and why youth need to be actionable and why we need to stop waiting for other people to be our savior.
That's powerful.
It does sound so I feel powerful just hearing it.
Oh, I'm so glad. That is the effect I want.
Yes. One other thing, you mentioned diaspora, the African diaspora. Now, I'm from the Bahamas. We're part of the African diaspora, and when we went to, as a part of our program, African relations, business relations, we went to Kenya, and people were like, "Was it so different? You first time going to Africa?" I was like, "There's so many times." I looked to my left and my right. Am I in Nassau? Is that Carmichael Road?
Really?
Certain streets. Is that Camp Road? Like I just saw like different parts of Kenya and Uganda that just brought me back home. It's so amazing. So we have that built in. Like even
Yeah.
when you listen to Bahamas and you go to Junction, I'll introduce you to something Bahamian. And you go to the Bahamas and like you go to Boxing Day Junction or you hear that drums bum bum bum, and you just feel that rhythm. So it's so much that we take from our African heritage that it's hard to go. For me, is like where do I place that? Because it's like a disconnect.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes I was having a conversation with a friend, and it was that disconnect of, I come from African heritage, but she's like, no, you're African. I'm like, I don't feel like I'm African. I'm Bahamian. No, but you're African. I'm like, no, because she's from Cameroon. So
Yeah,
how do we make that connect?
Yeah, sure. There's complexities. And I think it's about, firstly, I think as Africans, when we meet people from the Caribbean, we love to say, yeah, but you're an African, you must act a certain way, or you must fit a certain mold. And I think that's inherently problematic, because I think so often as Africans, we don't realize that, yes, as much as there may be similarities, there are inherent historical differences.
Yes.
And it's very, I mean, I've seen Rianne and some of my other friends from the Caribbean who then navigate their complexities in terms of identity. And I think you'll get some people from the Caribbean who will say, no, I'm African. Some others will say, no, yes, that is my heritage, but I am from the Caribbean. And I think both are fine, right? Because it's more about how you, as a human being, choose to identify in the world. And it's about what works for you as a person. I think what we do need, though, is more dialogue between Africans between Africans on the continent and those in the diaspora. We need a lot more dialogue on, cool, so we come from similar places, our histories are different, but let me understand you, why don't you understand me, and then how do we then work together from then, right? So how do we build both of these portions of the world?
Yes.
And one of the most amazing conversations I had with, he's the British High Commissioner from St. Kitts and Nevis. He is such a funny guy, really, really amazing guy. And he says to me, you know what, in his country, they encourage tourism only to the continent. Because he's like, he doesn't understand why people want to build the continent of already developed nations.
Yes.
And I said to him, that makes me do a lot of reflection, because I think as Africans, we still want to go to the UK or Europe or the US, but we never think of the Caribbean. And if we're not supporting one another's tourism industries, then whose interests are we serving? So there's so much dialogue, I think, that we need to do, and so much that we need to uncover. And hopefully through Rianne's great work and the rest of the team, AfricaMattis will be able to achieve that over the course. I don't think we'll be done with our work anytime soon,
Yes.
but it's great. We've got a big mandate that we want to fulfill, and we're still really young. Most of the team is between 20 to 28, so we've got a long time. Yeah.
That's amazing. And you mentioned, it's very interesting, you mentioned creating that diaspora. It'd be cool for us to connect those linkages. One thing I wanted to mention is, you said we don't support each other on everything, but the music.
Yes.
Man,
What is it called? Soca music.
Soca,
that's my
reggae.
favorite. That is my favorite, yeah.
Culture, Jamaican music. I heard a lot of Caribbean music in when I was in Kenya and Uganda.
Yeah, that's true. Music unites. Music unites.
Yeah, music is the first one. Yeah. Also, moving on to female empowerment.
Oh, yes. I do have a question. I read some of your articles, articles that were talking about you, and I saw that you have one where woman is written with an X. And
Yes.
I would like to ask you, why written with an X, and how is it important?
Yeah. So I'm not sure if I've said it yet in this interview, but I am a feminist. And to me, feminism is so important, because there's still so many inequalities in the world today. And I think that feminism has always been painted with this negative brush, but I don't think people who paint it with the brush realize why we have it, right? It's about ensuring that women are treated as humans, because in so many other parts of the world, you're just not treated as a human, or you're disregarded. And I think that there's so much work that still needs to be done. And more than that, I am what I'd like to identify as an intersectional feminist. So intersectionality is about recognizing that all oppressions are linked. So, and what I mean by that is, so if we take, for example, my friend Patricia. So Patricia is a white woman, but she's from Canada, from a culture called the Inuit culture. So in Canada, she is what's the word to use? She doesn't. What's the word to use? She is not as high up in terms of privilege, right, as the rest, as other Canadians would be. In fact, because of her culture, she may be seen as lower down, and she's a woman, right? So that means that she's got that double oppression. When she comes to South Africa, though, she's a white woman. So people are like, cool, you've got this culture, but you're still a white woman. And she recognizes that in South Africa, then she's very privileged. So it changes, and she's still a woman.
Yeah.
With myself, I am a black woman, and so first of all, I'm black, then I'm a woman, and I'm an African. So I'm pretty lower down in the privilege thing. But I am educated. which then increases my positionality. And something so silly, but because I'm lighter in complexion than other black women, I know for a fact that I'm still treated much better in different spaces. So it's about recognizing that various oppressions are linked.
Okay.
And I've got a lot of trans friends who I know aren't treated well, right, regardless of their race. So when I spell women with an X, it's for intersectionality reasons. It's because the fact that the traditional spelling of women with the MEN doesn't often include trans women.
Yeah.
It doesn't include non-binary persons. So because of that, we spell it with an X to say that you are whatever you want to be. If you want to identify in the spectrum of a woman, you are whatever you want to be. And I think that intersectionality is important. And so often it's the lack of intersectionality that has turned people away from feminism. But feminism is about recognizing that it's about choices. So I've got one of my best friends is a Muslim woman who can't wait to get married and be at home. And had you asked me a few years ago, I would have been like, why are you doing that? That's so oppressive. Now I understand that we're different. And if that's what she's working towards, then that's so fine. And I'm going to be her biggest supporter when she gets married, to which you better damn give me an invite to. But, it's like, so it's about recognizing that choice. And we spell women with an X because there's a diverse array of identities within being a woman itself.
Okay, that's so interesting, and I actually knew more or less what you were about to say, but I felt like it was very important that it came from you, and how would you explain it? Since we're still on the topic of women, I saw that you are participating to the hashtag end rape culture. What do you think about the new wave of the Me Too hashtag, or the Ich auch in German, even in French we have it? Do you think it's a good thing, or do you think there's something a bit not so good about it, something that would be kind of a bad feeling?
Sure. I actually went to a feminist meeting about this like 3 weeks ago. So I think that Me Too inherently has the right idea. So it's about raising awareness and saying that these issues of rape or sexual assault are not isolated to certain people, but that many different women experience them, and men as well. I think the issue is that with these campaigns is that it's always on the onus of women usually to prove, right? And I think that still perpetuates something wrong in our society. So even when I was at uni, and still now, I'm very active in the hashtag End Rape Culture campaign. And I mean, the reason that campaign started is just because in a lot of these South African universities, you're more likely to be expelled for plagiarism than you are for sexual assault. And that's something inherently wrong with our system.
Yeah, it is.
But then again, the onus was on women to prove that this was a bad thing. So I was at every protest. I went into men's residences to talk to them about rape culture and why it must stop. I spoke in women's residences about rape culture as well. And it's so sad because then the onus is on the same person. And I think with Me Too, it's as if we're always trying to convince men that this is what's happening in our society, help us. But I think that we need to find a way for men to lead a conversation with other men. To be like, this is what is happening in our society. How can we do better? How can we be better? So I've got lots of male friends who are feminist allies. And what we always talk about is about, so I am not going to teach you about rape or rape culture. I did that for 2 years, and it's draining, and it's exhausting, and I don't think it's my responsibility. But how do you have that conversation with people around you? And I think that if we have something a bit more powerful than Me Too, where we've got perpetrators talking to other perpetrators, I think that would change the narrative. Because I think we'll have a Me Too this year, and then in 2 years' time, we're going to have another Me Too. And then it'll be like what is in South Africa, where we started with end rape culture. And then this year we went on to Men Are Trash. And then we went back onto Me Too. And it's like the same thing, but what is the outcome, right? What is the effect if this is still happening?
There have been some proponents, male proponents, on the idea that there is this rape culture that's been perpetuated through many industries, but also in terms of the way the visuals between the way women are portrayed as these as sometimes prizes to be won, or
Yeah.
these sexual icons in the media, or however you put it,
Mm,
to sell different items. So there are some proponents of that, and I see myself as a, I don't want to sound like I'm defending myself, but as a partner of feminism. Do you think men can be feminists as well? Is that is
Yeah,
that
sure. That's such a great question. I think it's so possible for men to be feminists. I think we need more men who are feminists, and so just to go back to what you're saying about rape culture. So just to clarify for any listeners, rape culture is not a culture of rape itself. It's when sexual violence or degrading ways of portraying women becomes normalized or trivialized. And we see that after exam papers, like in South Africa, we've got a bad saying. After an exam, people will be like, yo, that exam raped me. And it's like, but why are we perpetuating that, you know? Also, like you said, various industries will show women in certain ways that are very, very problematic. At universities, you see men doing chants to get women's residences. Women's residences then being like, let me go do this, let me present myself in a certain way. So there's so much that we need to fix in our society. And I think the more lots of men also take a stand in realizing what the issues are, then the better our society will be. So most of my male friends, and I have a lot of male friends, most of them are feminists. And we've had cool conversations with them, and it's just been fantastic to see how they will be the ones who will stand up for something that they see is injustice. And what's amazing is that not all men like to call themselves feminists, but in their actions they are. So if I look at my dad, he's a typical Zimbabwean man. You know, this must be the way it is, and he's always said to my sister, "Now you guys can do anything you want to be. If you want to be a scientist, if you want to be a doctor, go for it. There's nothing stopping you." And I realized that through his actions, he was inherently a feminist, and then pushed me to be even more of the feminist than I am, such that when we go out for lunches and we'll talk, and there's usually there'll be some silly guy who comes up to the table and tries to charm my dad, saying like, "Oh, your daughter's so pretty." My dad will be like, "Yeah, I'm not speaking on her behalf. You talk to her." And usually I'm like, "No, you're annoying me." But it's like it's that. So it's men can definitely be feminists, and I encourage it. Yeah.
that's
I have, I think, one last. Well, I have a question, but how? What is the burden? How heavy it is to be both a feminist, a black woman, and defending all the time and trying to defy stereotypes? How? Isn't there times where you're just tired of it?
Sure, that is all the time. But what I do is that I'm very selective in my battles. So I've learned, I think the more I've grown, the more I've decided, let me just choose which battles I will take on. So I think it's about my encouragement to all people that you can change the world, but be kind to yourself. So just choose your battles.
Okay.
Yeah.
okay. Well, with that said, for those listening, if you want to be empowered and share more with our youth, you can find Farai on TEDxFS on YouTube. But with that, Farai, I thank you so much. Oh, well, lastly, we always do this. At FS Podcasts, we always try to promote Frankfurt School students and student initiatives, and just we like to highlight a lot of what's being done. So we a few weeks ago here at Frankfurt School, we hosted a few guests at FS Politics and Economics.
Oh, awesome.
We had a politician who I can't name, but I just like to credit them for their work and continue to keep up the good work over there.
That's awesome.
So we are doing some things at Frankfurt School that I just like to
Highlight.
acknowledge. And with that said, Farai, thank you. You've opened my eyes.
Thank you guys so
Yeah,
much.
that's
This is
true.
awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, I'm excited for tonight, and thanks for having me here.
for sure.
Thank you. And to our viewers, to our viewers, yes, our viewers and our listeners, we thank you so much for listening to and watching FS Podcasts. You can find us monthly at the end of the month. Please like, subscribe, and also share our videos on YouTube, but also subscribe on SoundCloud and iTunes as well. And thank you.
We are also on Instagram at FS Podcast, on Facebook at FSFM Podcast, and on Twitter also at FSFM Podcast. So go subscribe and like our post.
Yeah,
Cool.
thank you.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Oh, thanks, man.